Hey everyone, so today I have a tag for you, and this is the Self-Aware Reader tag, which was created by Courtney Farrader, and she tagged me in her original video, so thanks for tagging me. I'll leave a link to her video. And Brian from over at Bookish also tagged me, so I've been double tagged, and I'll leave a link to his video as well. And these are a bunch of questions about sort of what draws you into certain books, and they're really kind of some interesting questions. So, number one is, what most draws you into a novel or story and makes you want to keep reading? Plot, characters, writing style, atmosphere, something else? I would say something else. I would say that it's the premise. You know, the premise sounds really striking. Sounds like the novel is going to deal with some issues that I find very interesting, or the character is going to go through a journey that's really meaningful and perhaps moving, then that tends to grab me. And beyond that, I would say also like the setting. You know, if it's a historical setting that I find interesting, if it's about a historical person or period that I find interesting, then that could draw me in as well. Number two is, what is a convention or trope that will immediately turn you off in your reading experience with a novel or story? I can't really think of one, to be honest. I think if the writer is doing their job, then it shouldn't matter what tropes they use, so I don't have much of an answer. Number three, what most appeals to you when reading nonfiction and makes you want to keep reading? Insight. If the author is making me look at an issue in a new light, is teaching me all about a new issue that I knew nothing about, teaching me about history, someone's life, and so on and so forth. If they're giving me insights into whatever their given subject is, then I actually can forgive some clunky writing, really. To a point, obviously. If the writing really gets atrocious, then that becomes a problem. But if the writing is, like, serviceable, at least, then insight is kind of what draws me in and keeps me reading with nonfiction. Number four, what is a convention or trope in nonfiction that will turn you off in your reading experience? So it's writers who think that they're really deep and profound, but who really are either just sort of listing off cliches or truisms, or are just being incredibly surface level about whatever issue they're writing on. Those people just drive me nuts, because they think the world of themselves, and what they're saying is just not all that interesting, so that drives me nuts. Number five, would you say you read more for pleasure and enjoyment, or more to learn and exercise your brain? A lot of people who've been answering this question have been saying that those two, aren't mutually exclusive, that, learning is pleasurable, and I would agree with that to a point. I do find learning, reading nonfiction, reading heavy fiction that, sort of is you have to dig deep for, I do find it pleasurable, but there are those books where the payoff is much more pleasurable than perhaps the reading experience itself. For example, reading The History of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides is not a very rewarding reading experience, as like just it's not an enjoyable book, but it is fascinating. And so the learning part of that is pleasurable, but the actual reading isn't. And I definitely do force myself through books that aren't all that pleasurable if I perceive that there is an insight to be had from reading them, if I feel like they'll be worth it. And so yeah, I do definitely emphasize the exercising the brain part over the pleasure part, but obviously sometimes those overlap. Number six, which type of books are you likely to rate more highly and enjoy more overall? Brain candy, pleasure or enjoyment books, or brain protein books? Yeah, brain protein, definitely. I don't think I've ever rated a book highly simply on the basis of its entertainment value. I, in fact, don't know of very many books that I read simply because of their entertainment value, and I don't mean to sound snobbish when I say that. It's just not why I read. So yeah, definitely brain protein. Number seven, do you have a sense early on of whether or not the book you're reading will be a 5-star read, or a book you will really like if you don't do star ratings? Has a book ever surprised you in this regard? This depends on whether it's fiction or nonfiction. If it's fiction, then it can surprise me. I have read novels where I've started and it has just not been promising, and then it's really come together and been very interesting. And then there have been novels where they've had a banger opening and then have just fallen apart. But with nonfiction, I can generally tell, I think, within like 50 pages, whether or not it's going to be a really great read, or whether it'll just be one of those nonfiction books where I read it and find it interesting and get what I can out of it, but maybe it doesn't blow me away, or whether it will just be terrible. So yeah, it depends on which of those two genres I'm reading. Number 8, considering books that you rated 5 stars in the past, or if you don't rate them, then books you really loved, do you think you would feel the same way about them now? Why or why not? Yeah, definitely I think I would feel the same about them. You know, I have reread certain 5-star reads, and they have always held up for me. What does happen sometimes is there will be a book that formerly I held as like top 10 or maybe even number 1 that I reread and I still esteem, but that don't quite reach that level. So, for example, that happened a bit with Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, which I love. But when I read it for the first time in high school, it was like my favorite book ever. You know, I'm a hopeless romantic deep down, and Wuthering Heights was just amazing. And so it was my favorite novel for a long time. And then I reread it a couple of years ago, and between my first reading and my second reading, I had read a lot more, and so other books had kind of, you know, cropped up the list and bumped it out. And I reread it, and I thought, okay, it is definitely just as good as it was when I first read it, but it's not quite in the top 10, and certainly not number 1 anymore. It might be in a top 20 or a top 30, but yeah, not quite top 10 material anymore. So that does happen, but that's not me thinking less of Wuthering Heights. It's just that there have been other books that have been so good that they've bumped it out of the top spot. So, the last part is just to tag people, and I am going to tag one person. I'm going to tag To the Lit House, and I don't know the booktuber's actual name. I don't believe she's mentioned it in a video, but she's a very new channel. I think I was her, like, 2nd or 3rd subscriber, and now I think she has 30 or more, but she needs more. She's a great booktuber. I also want to give her a little shout out and just recommend that you all go look at her channel. She does really insightful and interesting reviews of really heavy stuff, you know, fiction and nonfiction. Obviously her channel name is a reference to The Lighthouse, and she has a video on To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, but she reads other philosophical books and nonfiction and fiction. Yeah, I want to give her a shout out, recommend you go see her channel, and if you want to do this, then do it. I'm not sure what your name is, but To the Lit House, if you want to do it, then please do it. So, anyway, yeah, that's all, and I will leave it at that. Bye, guys.